Hello, and welcome to my video. I'm Dom, and I just wanted to share with you guys a couple tips on oil painting. This is a style that I've developed, I don't know, over the last few years. I started painting a long time ago with Bob Ross, actually. My wife bought me a random kit one day when she noticed I was enjoying his videos, and I've been painting ever since. I typically like to start with just throwing down some colors. So these blues will eventually be clouds, but when I started painting, I just decided to put some shapes down. The colors I'm using are phthalo blue, titanium white, a little bit of transparent oxide red, and alizarin crimson. I've been typically just drawn to landscapes. They've always, just been interesting to me. Most landscapes that I do will typically not involve any man-made objects, if I can avoid it. So with this, I pretty clearly identified that the horizon line was going to be about 1/3 the way up the painting. And just decided to throw in this sky. And I know that might sound weird, but those shapes that I made could have been anything. Could have been mountains, could have been a tree, but it just felt right to make those clouds. And you might be able to see the brush that I'm using. It's a very cheap brush. I think I bought it for, in a pack of 3 for maybe $4. And I typically like just blending all of the colors on the canvas. So a lot of times you'll be seeing these mixing together. I just like the fluidity that it gives me, so that I don't have to be afraid of painting, that I can just throw anything on it that I want. So here you can see I'm using a paper towel just to brush off some of the excess. This typically helps me just get a little bit more room for new paint so that it doesn't become too muddy. And I decided here just to throw in some distant hills. And I think it was right about here I realized that this was going to be a seascape. So trying to throw in a little bit of a beach. Those lines that I drew initially, just to kind of keep in mind perspective, so that I have an idea of how far away I want the horizon to be. So just trying here to clean it up a little bit, because eventually when I do put in the water here, because I pretty quickly realized once I set in a beach that obviously going to be an ocean there soon. So I just kind of used that paper towel to smudge up the edge a little bit, just so when I apply the blue, that it doesn't mix too much with it. And funnily enough, still mixed. But I actually really liked the green color that came out of it. It ended up looking very much like the ocean. I've been on a couple trips recently to the ocean. I've always really enjoyed the greens that come out, especially in tropical oceans. So next up here, I'm just jumping back up to the sky, using a palette knife to apply a pretty thick coat of titanium white. This doesn't have any oil in it, so it will be very thick. And right now it might not look like much, but eventually I'm going to start using a larger brush and just, make those edges a little bit more gentle. When I'm doing this, I'm using a very light touch, because if you use it too hard, the colors will start mixing more than you want them to. So very gentle. And as you can see already, those edges start looking a little bit more cloudy. I'll come back through and clean up some of the brush marks a little bit, but the whole point of this is to just get that thick paint to look a little bit more gentle. Now I'm showing just brushing off that large brush there, because typically you want, with a brush like that, to just dry it off every couple of swipes, especially when you're trying to be gentle with those clouds, because you don't want it to start mixing the blues of the sky in with the nice whites that you laid down. And I decided those clouds looked a little bit too dark, so I decided to just start blending that white in a little bit. I like the idea of the different tones here, so you have that purple on the bottom, because oftentimes in clouds, you'll notice, especially in sunsets or in the morning, the bottoms of clouds will be very purple. So I like to kind of bring out that color in these landscapes. And then obviously just paper towel again, just to smudge those colors a little bit. And honestly, this style of painting that I'm using, it's very free. There's not really a lot of rules that you need to follow because the paint is pretty malleable. So when I put in something like these waves, they're all subject to change. I could, with one wipe of a paper towel, get rid of them and start completely over. Just put a new layer of paint on, and it'll mix in and work out pretty well. But just like I was saying earlier, these kinds of landscapes always interested me. I love being at the ocean. The first time I really spent time at the ocean was the first time I really felt calm. And for any of you who have experienced that same thing, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's just something about the waves and, just calming nature of being around something that's existed long before we did. It just always holds some kind of mystery for me. I have to say, this next bit here is one of the happiest moments I've been with clouds in quite a while. This very loose style, I thought was really, really nice. It was a little bit different than some of my other paintings. And I inevitably make the decision to smooth it out a little bit, just because it doesn't match quite with the ocean that I'm making. But maybe in future paintings I'll try to keep that very loose style. It's one of the things you always want with a painting. You don't want it to feel too contrived, don't want to overwork it too much. So something like this, if you see it in your paintings, it's like catching lightning in a bottle. But I did notice, just throughout painting, that top left corner, I was looking a little bit empty. So I decided to add a couple kind of wispy clouds, again with the palette knife. And just from a composition standpoint, I wanted something that really pointed the eye to those clouds. But after I put it down, I realized it just literally looked like I drew lines looking right at the clouds. So I started just looking into how I, make that gentle, break it up, and give it a little bit more interest. And I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with how they ended up. So this is the first painting of many. I, for a long time, have been interested in posting videos up on YouTube and just sharing my process. And this is step number 1. So if you like it, please leave a comment down below. Feel free to subscribe. I feel like, especially just starting out here, anything you can do would be very helpful. And as you can see pretty quickly, these clouds start looking a little bit less like lines and a little bit more like something that might be happening either far away, or these ones at the top here, maybe something that are coming over your head. And that's always the feeling you want to get in a painting. You want the land to really slowly creep up to you, and you want the sky to kind of have this feeling of coming over you. That's where you get perspective. Most of the time you hear perspective is this thing that you get in a landscape, but the sky is just kind of the backdrop for the landscape. But as much as you can, you want that sky to feel like it's coming over your landscape and eventually over your head. So the goal here is not for these clouds to look like something far away and behind the ocean, but like something that's creeping up over the ocean. These mountains on the left are really, depending on how you look at it, either the farthest thing away in this piece, if that cloud looks a little bit closer, or even that really far blue in the background, right? That'd be the farthest away. Now here I'm just kind of cleaning up and getting this a little bit more gentle for the landscape here, especially for those waves. And as you're doing landscapes, you want to always keep in mind the difference of contrast, right? So light colors right next to dark colors, really using that to separate it out. Now I'm just adding in these blues just to give the ocean a little bit more texture, a little bit more movement. Because I always find that with places like this, when you're looking at the ocean, I see a lot of artists spend a lot of time just really getting every little thing about their ocean down. Just recently I started using the palette knife for this, and with it you still get a level of spontaneity. You're not necessarily planning everything out, but it looks very natural, slightly impressionistic, but definitely brings a little bit more to it. And this is really where I started getting excited, at least about the landscape in this piece. The moment I started really putting in these whites, the beach really came to life for me. And again, all of this is very free. I didn't start out the painting planning out exactly where these were going to be. I didn't try to sketch any of it in. I just started going and tried to find what looked right. And eventually I find a couple things that need tidying up. Because obviously with this style, without much planning, you will find a couple, as Bob Ross would say, happy accidents. And you just have to kind of tackle those things as problems. And since this way of painting is so fluid, you're never really in too hard of a spot. There's always time to, change and correct something, even when you are dealing with a large amount of paint, like I'm putting down here with the ocean. Later, you'll kind of notice how those things play out, because there is a small bit of this that just looks a little bit off. But these waves, obviously, as they come closer, you want them to be a little bit bigger, so you get that feeling of perspective. And it was right around here that I noticed that this beach kind of looked like a road, very wide, and then it tapers off into the distance. And I just kind of pictured myself walking down this beach, the waves crashing, feet in the sand, and just started becoming a joy to paint. I find that if you can bring yourself into the piece, it oftentimes makes it easier for you to really know what you're doing and what you don't want to do, because you really kind of mentally get transported there. And the painting starts, as weird as it sounds, starts to kind of speak to you. So here it really just was taking me in and telling me, that you're going for a walk here. Now, with the landscape, you'll notice I'll make a lot of changes with this, because I'm constantly starting to think of, where the light's coming from, and obviously in this piece, it's coming from the top left. And I'm starting to try to lighten this up a little bit. I want to, get the effect of light coming on and hitting these specific hills or cliffs. And I start kind of adding these greens in and, trying to add a little bit of, I don't know, like forested area underneath there. And this is one time in the painting where normally I try to build up from darks to lights. In this, I went a little bit different. I wanted to see if I could just throw down some light green. And for this part of the painting, I'm using just a light green. Literally, that's the name of the color, just light green. Because again, just wanted to get this light kind of crashing through. But you always have to keep in mind that when you have a light, there is a shadow side to that. And for me, in particular here, I realized quickly that can't be all light, right? Have to have a little bit of that shadow. Just like with life a little bit, I guess. People have been going through, some very good times lately, but no matter what, you do have that, shadow patch, things that aren't as good. But, as always, things do clear up, and they get better. The light always returns. But enough of getting existential on you. Back to the painting. I'm doing a lot of kind of close-up work here, and you'll notice, that there was a harsh cut there, or will be a harsh cut soon. I tried to take the camera in a little bit closer so you could see these details I'm trying to make. There it is. Tried to get some of these details in. So if you notice on the bottom there, I had been using a brush and flicking it upward to try to bring some of those lights up into that tree line there. And I found a way to put in a little bit of sap green and light green right from the tube. Just add that in with the palette knife to give these greens a little bit more realism. Not every light green you're going to get is going to be that bright when the sun hits it. And that was a good example right there of just how flexible this is. I was able to just erase that tree line. It wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. It wasn't quite bringing me closer, making me feel like that part of the landscape was coming towards me. So instead I just erased it, let it be something farther away, and added in instead just some dark sands. And now back to the sky. So you'll notice I do bounce back and forth fairly often, and I do this for a couple specific reasons. I like the idea of giving the sky some time to be what it is, and I kind of forget about it because I get so in tuned with the landscape or the ocean or the waves that by the time I look back up at the sky, I start seeing it differently. There are a couple quick fixes for things like digital art. You can oftentimes just flip your painting upside down. Obviously, you could do that with a canvas, but I've never really tried it that way. Also, you can reverse an image, and you'll see it completely differently. You'll notice the composition a little bit more. So here I noticed that there's a lot of kind of light purple underneath this kind of dark, what I identified as the bottom of this cloud. And I just wanted to kind of give it a little bit more of a cloudy feel. So with this, pretty easy, just take the brush and flick upwards, and then wipe across, gently, very gently. All right, so now we're getting into a little bit more just blending, and back to the sea, right again, going just right back into it. And I grabbed the same brush that I used for the sky to just clean up that wave a little bit. And then this trick I really enjoy. You take a small kind of firm bristled brush and use a lot of oil in titanium white, and you flick it, kind of graze your finger against the top, and it creates these little small specks of white that work really well for any kind of waves crashing, you know, the kind of foam and spray that comes from the ocean. And here I identified I was pretty close to done, but I wanted to make a couple changes to the ocean there. And right there, just where I'm messing with the palette knife right now, that point was one I identified as not necessarily as real as I wanted it to be. You know, all the other waves are kind of slowly creeping over the sand, and that one just felt out of place. The line felt a little bit too sharp, a little too harsh of a diagonal. So I brushed it away, and it still looks just kind of like a blob of blue. I wasn't extremely happy with it, but eventually I came back into it with some of the sand color with that palette knife, and as you can see very quickly, it just looks like foam coming back over a dark patch of sand. So, you know, if you are the type of person, like I was when I started, that was afraid to make a mistake, don't. So I hope you enjoyed my video, and stay tuned for new ones.